Welcome to a deep dive into history's hidden dangers. We're about to uncover the unexpected perils lurking inside those charming Tudors and Victorian homes we often romanticize. Get ready for some serious, what were they thinking moments.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Our perception of home as this safe haven contrasts sharply with the realities of these historical eras.
Okay, so picture this. You're stepping back in time to the Tudor period, let's say the late 1500s. You find yourself in the home of a well-to-do merchant family. Not royalty, but comfortable, even stylish for the time. What dangers might be lurking?
Well, let's start with something seemingly innocent, sugar.
Sugar, like the stuff we try to avoid overdoing today.
Exactly. You see, during the Tudor era, sugar transitioned from an exotic luxury to a more affordable indulgence. This white gold, as it was sometimes called, became a symbol of wealth and status, even for the middling sort.
And they were going all out. I read about these elaborate sugar sculptures. They create everything from flowers to, get this, bacon.
It's true. These sculptures weren't just for eating. They were a way of displaying your prosperity. What's fascinating is that even as sugar became more commonplace, they were just beginning to understand the havoc it could wreak on their health, especially their teeth. Imagine the dentist's bills. Or, well, the lack thereof, because dentistry as we know it was pretty much non-existent.
Ouch. So they're indulging in sugar for status, completely oblivious to the long-term consequences. That kind of reminds me of, maybe we should save that thought for later.
Oh.
What else made these Tudor homes potential death traps?
Let's talk about chimneys.
Chimneys.
You might think, what's so dangerous about a chimney? But in the Tudor era, it was a relatively new innovation and one that came with its own set of fiery risks.
Right, because before chimneys, they basically had open hearths in the middle of the room, smoke everywhere. I've tried to cook over an open fire, and let me tell you, it's not efficient.
Precisely. So chimneys were a huge step up in terms of home comfort and design. They allowed for dedicated kitchens, upstairs rooms, all because you could direct the smoke up and out. But there's a reason the phrase going up in smoke exists.
Because these chimneys were basically fire hazards waiting to happen.
You got it. Flammable building materials, poorly understood mechanics, specifically the draw of a chimney, which is the force that pulls the smoke up, all contributed to frequent and devastating fires. Imagine your cozy fireplace could actually turn your house into an inferno.
Okay, that does make me appreciate my modern chimney, even if it does occasionally have a bird stuck in it. Are you telling me it could get even worse than fires?
You'd be surprised. We often forget about the dangers of everyday chores in the past. Take something as simple as getting water. No indoor plumbing meant regular trips to wells or rivers, and believe it or not, drowning deaths were shockingly common.
Drowning? Seriously, was it slippery banks, faulty buckets, or...
Well, those played a role, but the real culprit was often their clothing. Imagine falling into a river while wearing heavy wool garments.
Wool. Okay, that doesn't sound immediately life-threatening, but I'm guessing it absorbs water like crazy.
You're exactly right. Wool, while great for insulation, becomes incredibly heavy when soaked, dragging you down. Suddenly, a simple chore becomes a life-or-death struggle. Coroner's reports from the era frequently cite death by drowning, aggravated by the weight of clothing.
It's amazing how something we take for granted today, like a quick shower, used to be so fraught with danger. It's given me a whole new appreciation for my plumber. But let's switch gears from water hazards to something a bit more, shall we say, medicinal.
You're talking about the Tudor medicine cabinet. Now that's a topic ripe for exploration. Remember, this was an era where the printing press was revolutionizing access to information, including medical knowledge. For the first time, people had printed medical books at their fingertips.
Sounds like a good thing, right? More information, better healthcare.
In theory, yes. But the problem was, much of this newly printed wisdom was based on outdated or just plain wrong theories. Take syphilis, for example. A common treatment involved using mercury.
Mercury, as in the highly toxic element.
The very same. While it might have seemed effective at first, the side effects were often devastating. Severe pain, organ damage, even death. They were essentially trading one problem for a whole host of new ones.
So they were putting their faith in this new information, not knowing any better.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder to always double-check your sources, even or maybe especially when it comes to your health.
Absolutely. The Tudors, unfortunately, often learned this the hard way.
It makes you wonder what seemingly harmless things we have in our homes today might be considered dangerous in the future.
That's an excellent question, and one we might be able to answer as we delve into the Victorian era. Get ready, because things are about to get even more interesting, and by interesting, I mean terrifying.
Welcome back. Last time, we left off with a newfound appreciation for modern plumbing and a healthy dose of skepticism toward trendy medical treatments.
It seems those Tudor homes were full of surprises, many of them not so pleasant. But now let's step into a period often associated with elegance and grandeur, the Victorian era. You'd think with all their advancements, homes would be getting safer, right?
You'd think so. But it turns out even those grand Victorian homes were hiding some insidious dangers. Let's talk about those iconic Victorian wallpapers, shall we? Some of them were downright deadly.
Deadly decor, it's not something you'd expect. But during the Victorian era, a particular shade of green wallpaper, known as Shields green, became incredibly fashionable. Picture lush drawing rooms adorned with this vibrant hue. But there's a dark secret behind this popular color.
Okay, I'm officially intrigued. Don't tell me they were using some rare poisonous plant to create this color.
You're getting warmer. But the culprit was even more unexpected. It was arsenic.
The poison. They use poison in their wallpaper. How does they not realize how dangerous that was?
Oh. It's hard to imagine now, but at the time, they didn't fully understand the risks of arsenic. It was valued for its vivid color and was used in all sorts of everyday products. The symptoms of arsenic poisoning, things like headaches, weakness, vomiting, were often mistaken for other common illnesses. So people were literally living with slow-release poison on their walls and had no idea.
That's both fascinating and horrifying. And here I thought choosing the right shade of gray was my biggest decorating dilemma. Speaking of questionable choices, let's talk about corsets, another Victorian staple.
Corsets are a fantastic example of how societal pressures and ideas of beauty can impact health. It wasn't just about fashion, it was about achieving this ideal hourglass figure no matter the cost.
And the cost was often pretty high, right? I mean, you've actually tried on a corset. Tell me what it was like.
It was an experience, to say the least. While I did enjoy a dramatically smaller waist for a few fleeting moments, the constricting feeling was unbearable. I couldn't imagine wearing that all day long, and the long-term health effects were even worse.
Worse? Like what?
Well, imagine your internal organs being compressed, your ribs squeezed, your breathing restricted. Doctors at the time documented cases of deformed ribs, displaced organs, even difficulty breathing and digestive issues, all because of tight lacing.
You know, it's interesting how some things that were considered attractive back then are now seen as harmful and restrictive. Makes you think about what our current beauty standards will look like in 100 years. But let's move from constricted waists to another area where the Victorians were making strides, albeit dangerous ones, the kitchen.
Ah, the Victorian kitchen, a place of both innovation and, unfortunately, invisible threats. Remember our earlier discussion about gaslighting? Well, gas wasn't just for eliminating rooms. It was also fueling a new generation of stoves and ovens.
Convenient, right. No more messing around with firewood and open hearths. But what's the catch? What's the hidden danger this time?
The catch, my friend, was a silent and odorless killer: carbon monoxide. Leaky gas pipes, coupled with poor ventilation, turned those state-of-the-art kitchens into potential gas chambers.
Oh no, they had no idea what they were breathing in.
Exactly. And the worst part is, carbon monoxide poisoning was often misdiagnosed. The symptoms, headaches, dizziness, nausea, could easily be attributed to other illnesses. It's chilling to think that something as simple as cooking a meal could have had such dire consequences.
It's incredible how something we now consider so basic, like a safe stove, had such a treacherous beginning. But let's shift our focus from the kitchen to another room often associated with warmth and care, the nursery. It turns out even this seemingly innocent space held hidden dangers for the smallest members of the Victorian household.
Sadly, you're right. The very objects meant to bring joy and stimulation to children, their toys, were often a source of hidden harm.
Not more lead, right? I mean, we just talked about the dangers of lead paint in Tudor homes.
Unfortunately, you're correct. The use of lead paint continued well into the Victorian era, and toys were no exception. Those brightly colored wooden toys, the ones we now consider antiques, were often coated in lead-based paints, posing a serious risk of lead poisoning to children.
Lead poisoning is particularly dangerous for kids, isn't it? I remember learning that it can cause developmental delays and all sorts of other issues.
Precisely. And the saddest part is that the symptoms of lead poisoning in children were often subtle and easily dismissed. Irritability, fatigue, loss of appetite. It's heartbreaking to think that something as simple as a child putting a toy in their mouth could have such devastating long-term consequences.
It's a stark reminder that progress isn't always linear, and that sometimes even the most well-intentioned innovations can have unintended and tragic consequences. But what about those innovative baby bottles they came up with? Tell me those were at least a step in the right direction.
So last time we left off, we were talking about the dangers lurking in Victorian nurseries. It's unsettling to think about how something as simple as a toy or a baby bottle could pose such serious risks.
It really makes you appreciate how far we've come in terms of consumer safety. But you're right, those Victorian baby bottles, while seemingly innovative with their long tubes and rubber nipples, were a breeding ground for bacteria. It's like they were trying to solve one problem while inadvertently creating another. You'd think with all their emphasis on hygiene, they would figure that one out. But speaking of innovation, wasn't the Victorian era followed by a period of even more rapid technological advancement? The Edwardian era.
Absolutely. The Edwardian period was a time of incredible optimism and a belief that technology could solve anything. But as we've seen throughout history, progress often comes with a price.
Okay, so what seemingly harmless innovations turned out to be ticking time bombs in those fancy Edwardian homes?
Let's start with something we now take for granted, electricity.
Electricity. What could go wrong with electricity?
Well, electric lighting was all the rage, replacing those old gas lamps and their carbon monoxide risks. But the early electrical systems were, shall we say, a bit rough around the edges.
You're telling me they didn't have those fancy circuit breakers and safety standards we have today?
Not quite. We're talking poorly insulated wiring, overloaded circuits, a recipe for electrical shocks and fires. Imagine getting zapped just by trying to turn on a lamp.
Ouch. That definitely makes you appreciate modern electrical codes. Were there any other technological marvels that came with unexpected side effects? What about those newfangled refrigerators everyone was raving about?
Yes, the refrigerator. A true symbol of Edwardian modernity. But those early models relied on some rather volatile and toxic chemicals as refrigerants, things like ammonia and methyl ether.
Wait, so not only were you risking electrocution with your new electric toaster, but your refrigerator might have been leaking poisonous gas. It's like a homeowner's worst nightmare.
It's ironic, isn't it? They were so focused on progress and convenience that they often overlooked the potential dangers lurking within their homes.
It's a good reminder that every era has its blind spots. But it sounds like we were finally starting to wise up to the dangers of things like lead paint around this time, right?
Well, awareness was growing, but it took time for regulations to catch up. Believe it or not, lead paint was still being used in homes well into the mid-20th century.
You're kidding. So even with all the advancements of the 20th century, those Victorian and Edwardian dangers were still present in some form. It makes you wonder what seemingly harmless things in our homes today might raise eyebrows in the future.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's a good reminder that we should never become complacent when it comes to safety, and that progress isn't always a straight line.
Well said. It's been quite a journey exploring the hidden dangers of history's homes. From toxic wallpaper to explosive chimneys and even killer refrigerators, it's clear that our quest for a comfortable and stylish home has always come with its share of risks.
But it's also a testament to human ingenuity and our ability to learn from our mistakes. By understanding the dangers of the past, we can create safer and healthier homes for the future.
Absolutely. And on that note, dear listener, we've reached the end of our deep dive. We hope you've enjoyed this journey through the perilous past of Home Sweet Home. Until next time, stay curious, but maybe double-check your smoke detectors and give that vintage wallpaper a second thought.